responsibility. The milkman, the paper boy, evening TV. Did I get delivered here? Somebody tell me, please. This whole world confusing me. Clouds as mean as you ever see. Ain't a bird who knows you're true. Then a little voice inside you whispers, don't sell your dreams so soon. Everywhere you look, there's a heart, a hand to hold on to. Everywhere you look, there's a face of somebody who needs you. Everywhere you look, when you're lost out there and you're all alone, life is waiting to carry you home. Everywhere you look, everywhere you look.
All right, class, so now we're on part 2 of our lesson 1-1. Our same learning intention is we've already been able to add and subtract decimals. Now we're going to add in our multiplying part to it. Ms. Flemington is going to explain what you should be able to know by the end of this video.
All right, so our success criteria, how do you know that you're successful, right? At the end of our lesson today, because we are learning part 2 today, you will be able to do all of the following: add and subtract decimals with precision, multiply decimals, and add and subtract and multiply decimals to solve real-world problems, meaning that you will be able to apply the rules of adding, subtracting, and multiplying with decimals to real-world problems that are typically involved in word problems, okay?
All right, so in topic 1-1, part 2, our essential question today is how do you multiply decimals? So we're looking at multiplication. Okay, so take all those rules that you know about multiplication and we're going to add some decimals. Let's get started. So on our left-hand side, we have our academic vocabulary. Something that you might have heard before, the product of something is the answer to a multiplication problem. What is the product, right? We know, like, what is the sum, addition, what is the difference, subtraction. Our next vocabulary word is going to be factors. The factors are the numbers you multiply to get a product. So if we look at 3 times 2, like Ms. Flemington wrote, equals 6. We know that our product is 6. How do we get that number 6? What factors did we use to get 6? Well, we used 3 and 2. Those are our factors. And then an example, that is our third vocabulary term. 3 times 2 equals 6. 3 and 2 are the factors, 6 is the product. So when we see what is, give us an example, look at this example, they're just giving us what the problem actually is altogether. And then again, let's review from our first video, reasonableness. We're asking ourselves if this answer makes sense, right? So in our reasonableness, when we have 3 times 2 equals 6, we know that 3 times 2 is going to equal 6. But if you, somehow you maybe did it in your calculator, you did it in your head that 3 times 2 equals 60, well, we know that 60 isn't anywhere near 6. So we know that 3 times 2 to get 6, there's no reasonableness. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so let's keep going. Right underneath, we're going to look at our steps to multiplying decimals. In step 1, just very much like in our adding and subtracting decimals, we're going to line up our numbers. Not our place value, our numbers, okay? We're always going to put the number with the most digits on top, not the larger value, the one that has the most digits, as many numbers, right, in the actual problem. So this already makes it different from adding and subtracting decimals. In step 2, we're going to change our decimals to whole numbers by moving our decimal to the right as needed. In step 3, we're going to multiply just like we would with whole numbers. Okay, so we're going to multiply just normally. And then in step 4, we're going to add the total number of decimal places moved in the factors and move your decimal to the left that amount of times in your product. Do not let this scare you. We're going to show you in our examples if this kind of doesn't make sense just reading it, right, in a word form. So what this means is that we're just going to jump into example number 1 so we can show you. We're going to find the product of 4 times 3 77/100. So let's go into step number 1. We're going to line our values up by the digits. Okay, so notice in step number 1, there we go, that they're just lining them up. So we have 3 77/100 is not larger than 4, but it's going to go on the top because it has the most amount of digits. We have 3 digits in 3 77/100. In our whole number 4, we only have 1, so that will go on the bottom. We're just going to line them up as we would. Okay, so we see that we place our numbers and we line them up vertically. We put the number with the most amount of digits on the top, and then we're just going to write in the 4 just starting from the left. Or sorry, starting all the way from the right, And then we're going to move in step 2 our decimal 2 places to the right. And then in step number 3, we are going to multiply just like we would with whole numbers. All right, let's jump into example number 1. So we are going to find the product of 4 times 3 77/100. So here we're looking at both of our numbers. We are not looking at which one is greater. We're looking at which one has the most digits. We see that we have 4, and then which is just 1 digit, and then we have 3 77/100. That gives us 3 digits right there, right? So we're going to put the number with the most digits on the top. So because there are 3 digits in 3 77/100, that number will go on the top. And then we're going to put the 4 underneath, but we're going to start writing our values from our furthest right. Okay, so that's why the 4 is under that 7, because we're not lining them up by place value. We're just lining them up by starting from the furthest right. So when we move into step 2, in our notes it says that we're going to take our decimal and move it 2 places to the right. This is just so you guys as learners, when we go into step 3 and multiply, you'll multiply just those whole numbers. So you have 2 different options. You can either move the decimal 2 places to the right and write in that there were 2 decimal places that we're going to have to add in and when we find our product. Or you can leave the decimal and you're still going to multiply just normally. The only thing that you don't want to do if you were to leave the decimal in the original problem is that you don't want to bring it straight down, because that's not the rules of multiplying decimals.
So, like Miss Flemington just wrote in red and blue on that right-hand side, she moved the decimal place in 3 77/100 over to the right twice. And she made a note that in blue, there were 2 values after that decimal. So she's going to write a 2 to remind herself that there were 2 values after the decimal place. In that whole number 4, there were no values after a decimal place, right? We just have the whole number 4. So she wrote 0 because there were no numbers after a decimal. So when we have to ask ourselves, how many places do we have to move our decimal in the product? We know that we're going to end up having to move it twice. We're going to go over some more examples just in case this gets confusing. So let's go into step number 3. Now that we moved our decimal place and we noted that we have 2 values after the decimal, we can just multiply as we would normally. So we're going to multiply we're going to just multiply all the digits on the top by all the digits on the bottom, starting with the 1 all the way to the right. So 7 times 4, we know that that is 28. So we have the 8 on the bottom, we carry that 2 over to the top. 7 times 4 again is 28. We add that 2 to 28, and we're going to have 30. So we put our 0 on the bottom, our 3 we carry to the top. 3 times 4 is 12. and we add that 3 to get 15. Now this is where that 2 in blue, circled in yellow, comes in. So we're going to add our decimal all the way to the right as we would if this was a whole number. And then we look at that blue number 2 and we know that we're going to move our decimal from the right to the left 2 times. So we're going to go from right to the left twice, as Ms. Flemington just did. So she starts all the way from the right and goes doop doop to the left twice, and now we have 15 and 8/100ths. That is our product. We're going to check for reasonableness now, because 3 and 77/100ths is close to 4. We're going to multiply 4 times 4, right, which is 16. Our answer is 15 and 8/100ths. This is within that one value, right, close to 16. So our answer is reasonable. This makes sense. All right, you guys, so example number 2, we have a word problem. Don't let it scare you. We're going to look, what is the area of this antique map over to the right? We're going to use the formula A equals L times W. Area equals length times width to find the area of the map. Okay, because we know that the area of a rectangle is length times width. Perfect, let's keep going. We're going to multiply as we would with whole numbers, and then we're going to place a decimal point in the product. We're going to annex zeros if needed, which means we're going to add zeros in as our place value holder if needed. Okay, so that's what that annex zeros means. This might be the first time that you've heard of it. All right, so let's look at what is our length and what is our width, because they do give us 2 values. So our length on that bottom is 3 25/100ths, and our width is 2.5 feet. All right, so even just by saying it, 2 5/10ths, and then 3 25/100ths, I know that I'm going to have to annex some zeros in, right? So now, from our steps of multiplying decimals, let's start with step number 1. We're going to put the number with the most digits on the top. So our most digits, we're going to count. We know that we have 3 digits and 3 25/100ths. That goes on top. So then 2 5/10ths goes on the bottom. We do not line up our decimals. We just line up with our numbers, starting from right to left. All right? So now that we've lined up our decimals, we're going to move our decimals over to the right. And then we're going to make a note of how many times we moved over to the right. So in 3 25/100ths, we moved over our decimal to the right to get a whole number, 325 twice. So that's 2 times. And then in 2 5/10ths, we moved our decimal over to the right 1 time. So let's make a note of that. When we add those up, in our end product, we're going to have to move our decimal from right to left 3 times. Okay? So now that we've done all of our notes, we can keep going and now find the product. We're going to multiply every number on the top by every number on the bottom. So let's start with our first row. We're going to start with our number all the way to the right. So let's multiply 5 times 5, which is 25. With the 5 on the bottom, carry that 2. Again, 2 times 5 is 10. Add that 2 that we carried, and now we have 12. We carry that 1. 3 times 5 is 15. Don't forget about that 1. We add it, 16. Now we did the 5. Let's move over to the 2 in 2.5. 5 times 2, we're going to start in our second row, is 10. We annex our 0, so we put in that placeholder because we know that when we start with another row, we shift over and we start writing our values in. We shift over 1 place value. So now we have to annex that 0 under that 5. So we can start with 5 times 2, which is 10. Now we can start underneath that 2 of 10, carry that 1. 2 times 2 is 4. Add 1, which is 5. And then 3 times 2 is 6. Those are all of our values that we need to multiply. Let's add them up. 5 plus 0 is 5. 2 plus 0 is 2. 6 plus 5 is 11. And 2 plus 6 is 8. So let's look at our red number 3. Let's not forget about that, right? We're going to come back and look. That means that we're going to have our decimal all the way from the right. We're going to start it right after that 5, and we're going to move it over 3 values to the left, 3 digits to the left. When you do that, now we have 8.5. 125. Do you want me to say how we could check her reasonableness or no?
No.
Okay.
And do you want to maybe?
All right, I'll say it right now.
Okay.
So now that we found our product, we know that overall our area is going to be 8,125,000 feet squared. Do not forget to put that feet squared in. That's our units that we're measuring. And because we just multiplied feet by feet, it's feet squared. We'll learn more about that later. Let's jump right into our try-its. We have number 17 that we're going to start with. We have the same amount of digits in both values in 5 3/10 multiplied by 2 7/10. So here we're just going to line up our digits, and we have 5 3/10 on the top, 2 7/10 on the bottom. We're going to move our decimal to the right all the way and make note of how many times we move that decimal all the way to the right. We move them both one time. So in our end product, we're going to move our decimal over from right to left twice. All right, so now we could just multiply normal. We're going to multiply all of our values on the top by all of our digits on the bottom. Okay, so let's start with 7. We start with our value all the way to the right. 3 times 7 is 21. We put that 1, we carry that 2. 5 times 7 is 35. Add that 2, we have 37. Now let's multiply all of our digits by our 2. We're going to annex our 0. So we're going to put in a placeholder of 0 in our second row because we start one place value in, right? We start in that tens place, not our ones. So we added a 0. Now we can just multiply. 3 times 2 is 6. We put that underneath our 7. And 5 times 2 is 10. Now we can just add normal, straight up and down. 1 plus 0 is 1. 7 plus 6 is 13. 3 plus 1 is 4. And we just add that 1 to nothing, which is 1. Now we look at our red number 2. That's how many times that we're going to move that decimal that starts all the way from the right. We're going to move it to the left 2 times. So it's after that 1, we move it in twice, and we have 14 31/100. Perfect. Now let's go to number 18. We have 8 times 4.09. Which number has the most digits? 4 9/100. That goes on the top. We multiply by 8. We're going to move our decimal to the right twice because we're moving it all the way to the right. We make a little note that we moved the decimal to the right twice on the first number. We didn't have any decimals after the 8. So in our end product, we're going to move our decimal from right to left 2 times. Now we can just multiply normally with all the digits on the top by all the digits on the bottom. It's nice and easy. We only have one value on the bottom. So 9 times 8 is 72. 2, we carry that 7. 0 times 8 is 0. Any number times 0 is 0. So we add that 7. 4 times 8 is 32. We look at that red number 2. We know that we're going to have our decimal all the way to the right in our product and move it over to the left 2 times. So our end product is 32 72/100. Nice, simple, quick, and easy. We're going to jump down to quadrant number 3. We're just going to help you, Ms. Flemington is going to help you navigate how to do this word problem.
All right, so do you know how? Example 3, try it. Students at CMS are selling chocolates for $9.25 each. So when I see this, I know each means that is per one. So one box of chocolates is $9.25. They sold a total of, 42 boxes in the first week. How much money did they make that first week? So there are 2 ways to kind of solve this and navigate it, right? You can use addition. I know that is because if I have one box is $9.25, then I have 42 total boxes. If I wanted to see how much total money, I could add $9.25 42 times. But Ms. Conrado, who wants to do that?
Not me, not me.
Do I keep writing and writing and writing 42 times? No, right?
No.
So time, right? What is another operation we can use? What's the inverse operation, right? Another way, a shorter way, right, to find any addition problem is to use multiplication, okay? So you simply would be able to multiply that box price, which is $9.25, times 42 boxes.